Jamie Caldwell sat hunched over his laptop in his cramped studio apartment, the glow of the screen casting shadows across his unshaven face. The numbers on his analytics dashboard stared back at him like an accusation. 180, 7,432 views. 6 months ago, that same video format, him pranking random strangers at the mall, would have pulled 5 million views easy. Now, he couldn't even crack 200K. His finger scrolled compulsively through the comments section, each one a knife twist. This is boring. You fell off, bro. Unsubscribed. The worst part wasn't the hate, it was the indifference. People were forgetting he existed. The eviction notice on his kitchen counter had been there for 3 days. The bold red letters screaming, "Final warning." His landlord had stopped answering his calls. The brand deals that used to flood his inbox, energy drinks, cheap watches, mobile games, had dried up completely. His manager ghosted him 2 weeks ago. And Brittany, his girlfriend of 8 months, had left him with a text that still burned in his memory. "You're not famous anymore. I can't be with someone who's irrelevant." She'd moved on to dating a guy with 12 million followers before Jamie even had time to process it. He opened TikTok and watched the competition. A kid, barely 20 years old, had just gone viral for slapping his own grandmother with a tortilla. 15 million views. Another influencer had faked a kidnapping prank and got arrested, but not before hitting 20 million views and landing a podcast deal. The algorithm didn't reward kindness or creativity anymore. It rewarded chaos. It rewarded cruelty. Jamie's jaw clenched. If that's what it took to get back on top, then that's what he'd do. He'd go darker, meaner. He'd find someone who couldn't fight back. Someone who'd make the perfect victim for a savage prank that would break the internet. His phone was already charged. His blue sedan had a full tank of gas. All he needed was a target. Across town, in a small ranch house with a perfectly maintained lawn and an American flag hanging by the front door, Mr. Harold Willoughby stood in front of his bedroom mirror, buttoning up his old military field jacket. The olive green fabric was faded and worn, the patches on the shoulders barely legible after decades of storage. His fingers, gnarled with arthritis, fumbled with the brass buttons, but he refused to leave it undone. This jacket meant something. It had meant something in 1952 when he'd worn it in the frozen hills of Korea, and it meant something now. He caught his reflection and barely recognized the man staring back, 72 years old, thin as a rail, liver spots on his hands. His wife, Margaret, used to tell him he looked distinguished, even in his old age. But Margaret had been gone for 3 years now, and without her, Harold felt like a ghost, drifting through a world that had moved on without him. His son lived in California and called twice a year. His daughter sent Christmas cards with photos of grandchildren he'd never met. The neighborhood kids didn't even look at him when he walked to the mailbox. He was invisible, forgotten. Just another old man waiting to die. But not on Saturdays. On Saturdays, Harold had a ritual. He'd put on his jacket, grab his wooden cane, the one his father had carved for him before he passed, and walk to the Veterans Memorial at the Riverside Shopping Center. It wasn't much, just a small stone bench with a bronze plaque listing the names of local men who'd died in Korea and Vietnam. But it was his place. His brother's place. Every Saturday at 10 in the morning, Harold would sit on that bench, close his eyes, and remember. He'd remember Corporal Danny Reeves, who'd taken shrapnel meant for him. He'd remember Private First Class Miguel Santos, who'd sung Mexican folk songs to keep their spirits up during the coldest nights. He'd remember Lieutenant James Harding, who'd written letters to Harold's mother when Harold was too shell-shocked to hold a pen. Harold locked his front door and began the slow walk down Maple Street toward the shopping center. His cane tapped a steady rhythm against the sidewalk. His breath came in short puffs, his lungs weren't what they used to be. But he kept moving. The morning air was crisp, the kind of autumn chill that reminded him of Korea, though he tried not to think about that too much. The shopping center was only half a mile away, but it took him 20 minutes to get there. By the time he reached the parking lot, his knees were aching and his back was stiff, but he didn't care. He could see the memorial bench in the distance, waiting for him like an old friend. He didn't notice the blue sedan pulling into the lot behind him. He didn't notice the young man in the black hoodie and ripped jeans, phone already held high, camera already recording. He didn't notice the predatory grin spreading across Jamie Caldwell's face as he whispered into the microphone, "Yo, what's good, fam? Jamie's back, and today we're going savage. Check out this old dude. Watch this." Harold Willoughby kept walking, his cane tapping, his mind on his brothers, completely unaware that his life was about to change forever. Jamie circled the parking lot like a shark smelling blood in the water. His phone was hot in his hand, the red recording light blinking like a heartbeat. 1,200 people were watching his live stream, and the comments were already rolling in. "Do something crazy, bro. We waiting. You said savage, let's go." Jamie's eyes scanned the lot, passing over soccer moms, loading groceries, teenagers vaping by their cars, a couple arguing near a minivan. None of them were right. He needed someone helpless. Someone who couldn't fight back, someone who'd make his followers lose their minds. That's when he saw him, an old man in a faded military jacket, moving slow as molasses across the asphalt, leaning heavy on a wooden cane. Perfect. Jamie's grin widened. He angled his phone to capture the shot, whispering into the mic like a nature documentary narrator stalking prey. "Y'all see this? Old dude, military jacket, probably can't even run. This is about to be legendary." The comments exploded. "You! Do it! This is wild." A few voices of reason tried to cut through. "Bro, that's messed up. Don't do this." But Jamie ignored them. Haters always hated. Winners did what it took to win. What Jamie didn't see, couldn't see, because he was too busy watching his viewer count climb to 1,500, was the Route 66 diner across the parking lot. The place was a riverside institution, been there since 1958, chrome exterior and red vinyl booths, the kind of spot where truckers and bikers stopped for coffee and pie on long rides through Missouri. And this particular Saturday morning, the Iron Reapers Motorcycle Club had claimed every booth and table in the place. 40 men in black leather vests, the club's Reaper patch stitched across their backs, the American flag sewn on their shoulders. They'd just finished a charity ride for the Wounded Warrior Project, raising 15 grand for veterans dealing with PTSD and traumatic brain injuries. Now they were refueling eggs, bacon, hash browns, coffee strong enough to strip paint. Frank Garrison sat at the head table, a mountain of a man with a grey beard and hands like catcher's mitts. He'd served 2 tours in Iraq with the Marines before he came home and found his real family on 2 wheels. Next to him sat Ken Wrench Morrison, the club's road captain, a wiry guy with tattoos covering every inch of his arms and a mind sharp as a blade. Across from them was Blade, the sergeant-at-arms, 6'4" of pure intimidation, the kind of guy who didn't need to raise his voice to make a point. The rest of the Reapers filled the diner with the comfortable noise of Brotherhood laughter, trash talk, stories from the road. Frank was halfway through his second cup of coffee when he glanced out the window and saw Mr. Willoughby. He didn't know the man's name yet, but he recognized the walk, the careful steps, the way he held himself despite the pain. Frank had seen that walk in VA hospitals, at veteran reunions, in the mirror on bad days. That was a man who'd served, a man who'd earned his right to walk in peace. Frank nodded toward the window. "Ken, you see that?" Ken followed his gaze and nodded. "Korean War, maybe Vietnam. Look at that jacket. That's old school issue." Blade leaned back in his chair. "Man's got more honor in his pinky than most people got in their whole body." They watched Mr. Willoughby make his way toward the memorial bench near the far end of the lot, the one dedicated to Riverside's fallen soldiers. It was a small thing, just a stone bench and a bronze plaque, but it mattered. Frank made a mental note to go say hello after breakfast, maybe shake the man's hand, let him know he wasn't invisible, not to the Reapers. not to men who understood what service meant. But then Frank saw something else. A kid in a black hoodie, phone held high, moving fast toward the old man. Frank's gut tightened. He'd seen that look before, that predatory focus, that grin. "Ken," Frank said quietly, his voice dropping into the tone he used when things were about to go sideways. "You seeing this?" Ken's eyes narrowed. "Yeah, I'm seeing it." Blade was already standing, his chair scraping against the linoleum. The diner went quiet. 40 pairs of eyes turned toward the window. Jamie Caldwell closed the distance between himself and Mr. Willoughby, his phone capturing every step. "Yo, old man," he called out, his voice dripping with fake friendliness. "You dropped something." Harold Willoughby turned around, confused, his weathered face creasing into a polite smile. "Excuse me, son." And that's when Jamie made his move. Jamie didn't hesitate. He'd learned from other viral videos that hesitation killed momentum. You had to commit. You had to go all in. So he planted his feet, pulled his phone back to get the perfect angle, and shoved Mr. Willoughby hard in the chest with both hands. The old man didn't stand a chance. His cane flew out of his grip, clattering across the asphalt like a gunshot. His glasses launched off his face and skittered under a parked car. Harold Willoughby hit the ground hard, his 72-year-old body crumpling like paper, his head smacking the pavement with a sickening thud that made Jamie wince for half a second before the adrenaline kicked back in. The live-stream chat went absolutely insane. "Ooh, he did it! Bro, that's wild! This is too far, man! Savage!" Jamie circled the fallen man like a hyena, his phone camera capturing every angle, the shock on Willoughby's face, the way his hands trembled as he tried to push himself up, the tear that slid down his cheek and mixed with the dirt on the asphalt. Harold wasn't crying from pain, though his hips screamed and his head throbbed. He was crying from humiliation, from the realization that he really was invisible, that the world really had forgotten men like him. That respect really was dead. Jamie leaned down, his face filling the camera frame, his voice loud and mocking. "Respect your elders? Nah, fam. Respect the clout." He threw his head back and laughed, the sound echoing across the parking lot. 2,000 viewers now. The algorithm was eating this up. His phone was buzzing with notifications, new followers, new comments, new shares. This was it. This was the comeback. But Jamie wasn't done. He needed one more thing, one final moment that would cement this video in internet history. He cleared his throat, loud and theatrical, working up a mouthful of saliva. And then he spit, right on Harold Willoughby's chest, right on the faded American flag patch that the old man had worn with pride for 50 years. The spit landed with a wet splat, sliding down the olive-green fabric. Harold stared at it, his mind unable to process what had just happened. In Korea, he'd been shot at. He'd been cold and hungry and scared. But he'd never been disrespected like this, never been treated like garbage, like he was nothing. His lips moved, trying to form words, but nothing came out. Jamie was already backing away, phone still recording, shouting into the camera. "That's how you do it, fam. That's content. Smash that follow button if you're not a coward." He was so focused on his screen, so drunk on the rush of going viral, that he didn't hear the sound behind him. The sound of a diner door slamming open, the sound of boots hitting pavement, the sound of 40 men moving as one. Inside the Route 66 diner, Blade had seen the shove. He'd stood up so fast his chair toppled backward, the crash silencing the room. "Frank!" Now. Frank's head snapped toward the window just in time to see the spit. His face went stone cold. Ken was already moving, his hand slamming down on the table hard enough to rattle every plate in the place. "Let's go!" The Reapers didn't need to be told twice. This was what they lived for. Not the violence, they weren't thugs, but the protection, the justice, the code that said you don't let evil walk away laughing. 40 men poured out of that diner like a flood, their boots thundering across the parking lot, their faces set in expressions that would make grown men wet themselves. Frank led the charge, his voice booming across the lot like the voice of God. "Get that punk!" Jamie finally looked up from his phone. His smile died. His blood turned to ice. Because sprinting toward him, closing the distance fast, was an army of leather and denim and fury, bikers, dozens of them, and they looked like they wanted to rip him apart. Jamie's live stream chat exploded. "Bro, run. You're dead. Those are bikers. Oh my God." Rip Jamie. His legs finally got the message from his brain. He turned and ran toward his blue sedan, his phone still clutched in his shaking hand, his breath coming in panicked gasps. But he was too slow, way too slow. Blade reached him first, cutting off the car door like a linebacker. Jamie slammed into him and bounced off like he'd hit a brick wall. "Where you think you're going, tough guy?" Blade's voice was quiet, calm, terrifying. Jamie stumbled backward, right into Ken, who grabbed him by the hood of his sweatshirt and held him in place. "It's just a prank, bro." Jamie's voice cracked, high-pitched and desperate. "It's just content. Chill, chill." But nobody was chilling, because Frank had arrived. And when Frank Garrison arrived, the world stopped spinning. Frank Garrison didn't run anymore. His knees had too many miles on them from humping gear through Fallujah. But he moved with purpose, and when a man his size moved with purpose, it looked like a freight train coming down the tracks. The other Reapers fanned out in a perfect V formation, a tactical maneuver they'd learned from their military days, cutting off every escape route in the parking lot. This wasn't a mob. This was a unit. Jamie Caldwell was surrounded before he even realized what was happening, a circle of black leather and American flag patches closing in like the walls of a tomb. Jamie's phone was still recording, still live streaming to 2,500 viewers who were watching this kid's life fall apart in real time. The comments were a blur of chaos. "You're cooked, bro. Bikers don't play. Say your prayers. This is the best content ever." Jamie's hands were shaking so bad he almost dropped the phone. His legs felt like jelly. His mouth tasted like copper. He'd never been in a real fight in his life, never faced real consequences. His whole world was filters and edits and the block button. But you can't block a biker. You can't edit your way out of 40 men who just watched you spit on a veteran. Frank stopped 3 feet away from Jamie, close enough that the kid had to crane his neck to look up at him. Frank didn't say anything at first. He just stared. His eyes were the color of steel, and they held the kind of weight that came from seeing things most people couldn't imagine. Jamie tried to speak, his voice coming out in a pathetic squeak. "Look, man, I didn't mean—" Frank held up one hand. Jamie's mouth snapped shut. "You didn't mean to shove an old man to the ground. You didn't mean to spit on a United States veteran. You didn't mean to disrespect a man who fought for this country so you could have the freedom to be a piece of trash." Frank's voice was low, controlled, but every word hit like a hammer. "Which part didn't you mean, son?" Behind Frank, 2 Reapers, Doc, and a younger guy named Ricky were kneeling beside Mr. Willoughby, helping him sit up. Doc was a former army medic, and his hands moved with practiced efficiency, checking the old man's pupils, feeling for broken bones, retrieving his glasses from under a car. "You're okay, sir," Doc said softly, his voice gentle in a way that didn't match his appearance. "We got you. You're safe now." Ricky handed Willoughby his cane, and the old man gripped it like a lifeline, his hands still trembling. He looked at the bikers surrounding him, these rough, tattooed men who looked like they'd walked out of a nightmare, and saw something he hadn't seen in years. He saw respect. He saw protection. He saw brothers. Jamie tried again, his voice cracking. "It's a social experiment. I was going to help him up after. I swear, it's for my channel. I need the views, man. I'm broke. I'm about to get evicted." Ken cut him off, his voice sharp as a knife. "So you thought you'd make money by assaulting an old man? That's your business plan?" Blade stepped closer, his shadow falling over Jamie like a storm cloud. "You know what we do for a living? We ride. We raise money for veterans. We visit VA hospitals. We go to military funerals when nobody else shows up. And you just spit on one of the men we're trying to honor. You picked the wrong parking lot, kid." Jamie's knees buckled. He would have collapsed if Ken wasn't holding him up by his hoodie. I'm sorry, okay, I'll delete the video, I'll apologize, just let me go. Frank shook his head slowly. Oh, you're gonna apologize, but you're not going anywhere, not yet. He held out his hand, palm up. Give me the phone. Jamie's eyes went wide. What? No, you can't. Frank's expression didn't change. Give me the phone. Now. The way he said it left no room for argument. It wasn't a threat, it was a fact. Jamie was going to hand over that phone, or things were going to get much worse. Jamie's fingers fumbled with the device, nearly dropping it twice, before he finally placed it in Frank's massive hand. Frank looked at the screen. The live stream was still running. 2,800 viewers. Comments flying past faster than he could read them. He turned the camera toward his own face, and the chat went silent for a split second before exploding. Who is that? Big dude. Oh, he's cooked. Frank's voice filled the microphone, deep and resonant. Y'all wanted content? Here's some content. My name is Frank Garrison. I'm the president of the Iron Reapers Motorcycle Club here in Riverside, Missouri. And what you just watched was a coward assaulting a 72-year-old Korean War veteran for internet clout. The comments shifted. Thank you. Bikers are heroes. Get him, Frank. Justice. Frank continued, his eyes never leaving the camera. This man behind me, Mr. Willoughby, served this country when most of y'all's grandparents were still in diapers. He earned the right to walk in peace, and this punk thought it'd be funny to spit on him. Frank turned the camera toward Jamie, who looked like he wanted to disappear into the asphalt. Take a good look, folks. This is what a coward looks like, and he's about to learn what accountability means. The sirens started wailing in the distance, growing louder. Someone had called the cops. Jamie's face went white as a sheet, and Frank smiled for the first time since this whole thing started. It wasn't a friendly smile. The circle of bikers tightened around Jamie like a noose, and the kid was hyperventilating now, his chest heaving, his eyes darting around looking for an escape that didn't exist. 40 men stood between him and freedom, and every single one of them looked like they'd been carved from granite and bad intentions. Frank handed the phone to Ken, who kept the live stream running, angling it to capture everything. 3,200 viewers now. This was going more viral than anything Jamie had ever posted, but for all the wrong reasons. The comments were a mix of schadenfreude and righteous fury. He's about to cry. Good, he deserves it. Bikers don't play. This is better than Netflix. Frank crossed his arms over his chest, the leather of his vest creaking. What's your name, son? Jamie's voice came out as a whisper. Jamie Caldwell. Frank nodded slowly. Jamie Caldwell. How old are you? 24. 24 years old. Old enough to know better. Old enough to understand that actions have consequences. You got a job, Jamie? Jamie shook his head. I'm an influencer. I make content. Blade snorted. You mean you make garbage and call it content? Frank held up a hand, silencing Blade. How many followers you got, Jamie? 2 million. Well, I had 2 million. I've been losing them. That's why He stopped, realizing he was about to incriminate himself further. Frank's eyes narrowed. That's why you what? That's why you decided to assault an old man? Because your internet fame was slipping? Jamie's face crumpled. You don't understand. This is my life. This is how I pay rent. If I don't go viral, I'm nobody. I'm nothing. Ken stepped forward, his voice cold. So you thought you'd go viral by spitting on a veteran, by disrespecting a man who fought in Korea? You know what they went through over there? You know what the Chosin Reservoir was? You know what it's like to watch your friends freeze to death in foxholes while the Chinese army tries to overrun your position? Jamie stared at him blankly. He didn't know. He didn't know anything except algorithms and engagement metrics and the desperate hunger for validation from strangers. Frank turned and walked over to Mr. Willoughby, who was now sitting on the memorial bench, Doc still checking him over. Frank knelt down, bringing himself to eye level with the old man. "Sir, I'm Frank Garrison. This is my club, the Iron Reapers. We're gonna make sure this kid faces consequences for what he did to you. But first, I need to know, are you hurt? Do you need an ambulance?" Harold Willoughby looked at Frank with watery eyes, and when he spoke, his voice was steady despite the tears. "I'm not hurt, son, not physically. But my pride, my dignity—" He trailed off, his gaze dropping to the spit stain on his jacket. Frank's jaw clenched so hard his teeth ached. He stood up and walked back to Jamie, and this time there was no patience in his expression. "You see that man over there? That's Mr. Harold Willoughby. He's 72 years old. He served in the Korean War. He's a widower. He comes to this parking lot every Saturday to sit on that bench and remember his fallen brothers. Men who died so you could have the freedom to make your little videos. And you spit on him. You spit on his service. You spit on his sacrifice. You spit on everything that flag on his jacket represents." Frank's voice was rising now, the anger finally breaking through the control. "Do you have any idea what you've done? Do you have any concept of honor, of respect, of basic human decency?" Jamie was crying now, full-on sobbing, snot running down his face. "I'm sorry, I'm so sorry, I didn't think—" "No," Frank interrupted. "You didn't think. That's the problem. You didn't think about him as a human being. You thought about him as content, as a prop, as a way to get views." He grabbed Jamie by the front of his hoodie and pulled him close, their faces inches apart. "Well, congratulations, Jamie. You're about to get more views than you ever dreamed of, but not the kind you wanted." The sirens were close now, maybe a block away. Ken kept the phone trained on Jamie's tear-streaked face, and the live-stream chat was eating it up. "He's crying. Good. This is justice. Somebody screen record this." Frank released Jamie and stepped back. "Here's what's gonna happen. You're gonna walk over to Mr. Willoughby. You're gonna look him in the eye, and you're gonna apologize. A real apology. Not some influencer non-apology where you say, 'I'm sorry if anyone was offended.' You're gonna own what you did, and you're gonna mean it. Because if I think for 1 second that you're faking it, I'm gonna let Blade here have a conversation with you, and trust me, you don't want that." Blade cracked his knuckles, the sound like gunshots in the tense silence. Jamie nodded frantically. Okay, I'll do it. I'll apologize. Just please don't hurt me." Frank pointed toward the bench. "Then move." Jamie stumbled forward, his legs barely holding him up, Ken following with the phone, capturing every step. The circle of bikers parted to let him through, and Jamie found himself standing in front of Mr. Willoughby, who looked up at him with an expression that was somehow worse than anger. It was disappointment. It was sadness. It was the look of a man who'd seen the worst of humanity and had hoped, foolishly, that maybe things were getting better. Jamie opened his mouth, and the words came out in a broken whisper. "Sir, Mr. Willoughby, I'm so sorry. I don't know what I was thinking. I was desperate and stupid and cruel, and you didn't deserve any of that. You deserve respect. You deserve honor. And I took that from you, and I can't take it back." Harold Willoughby stared at this young man, this boy really, and saw something he recognized. He saw someone lost, someone broken by a world that valued the wrong things. And despite everything, despite the pain in his hip and the humiliation burning in his chest, Harold Willoughby did what he'd always done. He chose grace. "Son," he said quietly, "I forgive you, but forgiveness doesn't erase consequences. You need to learn from this. You need to be better." Jamie nodded, tears streaming down his face, and for the first time in years, he felt something other than the hollow ache of chasing fame. He felt shame, real, deep, soul-crushing shame. And maybe, just maybe, that was the first step toward becoming a human being again. Frank took the phone back from Ken and held it up, the camera now pointed at Jamie's devastated face. The viewer count had exploded, 4,500 people watching live, and the number was climbing every second. The algorithm had caught fire. This was trending. This was going to be everywhere by tonight. Frank's voice filled the microphone, steady and commanding, the voice of a man who'd led troops through hell and knew how to make people listen. For everyone watching this, I want you to understand something. This isn't entertainment. This isn't a prank. This is a crime. What you just witnessed was assault and battery, and this young man is about to face the consequences. The comments were a waterfall of reactions. Preach, Frank! This is what real men look like. Bikers are the good guys. Jamie's life is over. A few trolls tried to defend Jamie. It's just a prank, bro, chill. Y'all are too sensitive. But they were drowned out by the overwhelming tide of support for the Reapers and Mr. Willoughby. Frank continued, his eyes boring into the camera. I've been riding with the Iron Reapers for 15 years. Before that, I served 2 tours in Iraq with the United States Marine Corps. I've seen what real courage looks like. I've seen men sacrifice everything for their brothers. And I've seen what cowardice looks like too. This right here, he gestured toward Jamie, this is cowardice. Frank turned the camera toward Mr. Willoughby, who was still sitting on the bench, Doc beside him. This man, Mr. Harold Willoughby, is a Korean War veteran. He's 72 years old. He's a widower. He comes to this memorial every Saturday to honor his fallen brothers. He's lived a life of service and sacrifice, and today he was attacked by someone who's never sacrificed anything in his life. Someone who thinks respect is something you buy with followers and likes. The camera swung back to Jamie. Jamie Caldwell here thought it would be funny to shove Mr. Willoughby to the ground and spit on him. For content, for views, for clout. Well, Jamie, you got your views, but you also got something else. You got justice. The sirens were right outside the parking lot now, 2 Riverside Police Department cruisers pulling in with lights flashing. Frank didn't flinch. He kept the camera rolling. The police are here now. Jamie's gonna be arrested. He's gonna be charged. And his life is gonna change forever. Not because we hurt him, we didn't lay a hand on him, but because he hurt someone who couldn't defend himself, and we made sure he couldn't run away from what he did. Frank's voice softened slightly, taking on an almost paternal tone. To all you young folks watching this, learn from Jamie's mistake. Clout isn't worth your soul. Fame isn't worth your integrity. And if you ever see someone being disrespected, especially a veteran, especially an elder, you stand up, you intervene, you be the person who makes a difference. 2 police officers stepped out of their cruisers, Officer Martinez, a stocky Hispanic man in his 40s, and Officer Daniels, a younger black woman with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor. Martinez recognized Frank immediately and nodded. The Reapers had a good relationship with Riverside PD. They'd worked together on charity events, toy drives, and community outreach programs. Martinez approached, his hand resting casually on his belt. Frank, what's the situation? Frank handed him the phone, still live streaming. Officer Martinez, this young man, Jamie Caldwell, assaulted Mr. Harold Willoughby, a 72-year-old Korean War veteran. Shoved him to the ground, spit on him, all while live-streaming it to his followers. We witnessed the whole thing from the diner. We detained him and called you. The evidence is all on video. Martinez took the phone and watched the screen for a moment, his expression darkening as he read the comments and saw the viewer count now over 6,000. He handed the phone back to Frank and turned to Jamie. Son, I'm going to need you to put your hands behind your back. Jamie's face went white. Wait, what? You're arresting me? But I apologized. I said I was sorry. Officer Daniels stepped forward, her voice firm. An apology doesn't erase a crime. You committed assault and battery. That's a criminal offense. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. She pulled out her handcuffs, and Jamie started to panic, his voice rising to a shrill pitch. This is insane. It was a prank. A prank. You can't arrest me for a prank. Martinez's expression hardened. We can, and we are. You assaulted an elderly veteran. You spit on him. That's not a prank. That's a crime. And you filmed it, which means we have all the evidence we need. Daniels cuffed Jamie's wrists behind his back, and the kid finally broke completely, sobbing so hard he could barely breathe. "My life is over. My career is over. I'm gonna go to jail." Blade, standing nearby, muttered just loud enough for everyone to hear, "Should have thought about that before you spit on a veteran." The other Reapers nodded in agreement, their faces grim but satisfied. Justice was being served, the system was working, and it was all happening live for thousands of people to see. Frank held the phone up one last time, addressing the audience directly. "This is the end of the live stream, folks. Jamie's going to be taken into custody. Mr. Willoughby is going to be taken care of, and the Iron Reapers are going to make sure this story doesn't end here. We're going to follow up. We're going to make sure Jamie faces real consequences, and we're going to make sure Mr. Willoughby knows he's not alone. He's got a family now. He's got us." The comments exploded with support. "Frank for president. Iron Reapers are legends. Thank you for standing up. This restored my faith in humanity." Frank looked directly into the camera, his eyes intense. "Remember this, everyone. Honor still matters. Respect still matters. And brotherhood still matters. Don't let anyone tell you different." He ended the live stream. The screen went black, and then, with a deliberate motion that felt like the closing of a chapter, Frank dropped the phone onto the asphalt. Blade stepped forward, raised his boot, and brought it down hard. The phone shattered into a dozen pieces, the screen splintering like a spider web, the case cracking open, the circuit board exposed and broken. Jamie let out a strangled cry, watching his livelihood, his identity, his entire world reduced to electronic garbage on the pavement. "That was a $1,200 phone," he wailed. Ken shrugged. "Should have used it to call your mum and ask her where she went wrong raising you." The Reapers laughed, a low rumble of dark humor, as Officer Martinez led Jamie toward the cruiser. The kid was still crying, still begging, still not understanding that some mistakes you can't undo, some consequences you can't escape, and some men you should never, ever disrespect. Officer Martinez opened the back door of the cruiser and guided Jamie inside with a firm hand on his head, the way cops do to make sure you don't crack your skull on the doorframe. Not that Jamie deserved the courtesy, but Martinez was a professional. Jamie slumped into the seat, his cuffed hands digging into his back, his face a mess of tears and snot and ruined mascara. Yeah, mascara. The kid wore makeup for his videos, and now it was streaking down his cheeks like war paint applied by a drunk toddler. Officer Daniels leaned into the car, her voice calm but unyielding. "You're being charged with assault and battery. Depending on the DA, you might also face charges for elder abuse and hate crime enhancements, since you targeted a veteran. You're looking at anywhere from 6 months to 2 years, plus fines, plus a permanent record. Do you understand?" Jamie's voice was barely a whisper. "I understand." But he didn't. Not really. He understood the words, but he didn't understand how his life had gone from scrolling through analytics in his apartment to sitting in the back of a police car in the span of 3 hours. He didn't understand how a simple prank, okay, not simple, not even really a prank, but still had turned into this nightmare. He didn't understand how 40 bikers had appeared out of nowhere like some kind of leather-clad avenging angels. And he definitely didn't understand why everyone was treating this like he'd committed murder. It was just an old man, just a stupid video, Jamie's thoughts trailed off as he realized, maybe for the first time in his life, that he was the villain in this story. Not the misunderstood anti-hero, not the edgy rebel, the actual villain. Outside the cruiser, Officer Martinez was taking statements from Frank, Ken, Blade, and several other Reapers who'd witnessed the assault. A small crowd had gathered, shoppers, diner staff, a couple of teenagers filming on their phones, because of course they were. This was Riverside, Missouri, population 42,000, the kind of town where nothing exciting ever happened until it did, and then everyone wanted a piece of it. Martinez pulled out his notepad, old-school pen and paper, because he didn't trust those fancy tablets the department kept trying to push on him. "Frank, walk me through what you saw. Frank's account was clear, concise, and damning. He described the shove, the spit, the mocking laughter, all of it captured on Jamie's own live stream. We didn't touch him, Martinez. We surrounded him, we detained him, but we didn't lay a hand on him. This was a citizen's arrest, by the book. Martinez nodded. Missouri law allowed for citizens' arrests in cases of felonies or breaches of the peace committed in the presence of the person making the arrest. Assault and battery qualified. The Reapers had done everything right. Any witnesses besides your club? Frank gestured toward the crowd. Plenty. That woman over there with the 2 kids saw the whole thing. So did the couple by the minivan, and the diner staff watched it through the window. Officer Daniels approached a middle-aged woman in a floral dress, her 2 young children clinging to her legs. Ma'am, did you witness the incident? The woman nodded vigorously, her voice shaking with anger. I saw everything. That boy attacked that poor old man for no reason. Just shoved him down and spit on him like he was trash. It was the most disgusting thing I've ever seen. Those bikers saved him. If they hadn't been here, that boy would have just driven away laughing. Daniels took her statement, then moved on to the couple, then to a teenager who'd been vaping by his car and had filmed part of the incident on his phone. Every single witness corroborated the Reaper's account. Jamie Caldwell had assaulted Harold Willoughby. The evidence was overwhelming. The case was open and shut. Martinez walked over to Mr. Willoughby, who was still sitting on the memorial bench, Doc hovering nearby like a protective mother hen. Martinez knelt down, his voice gentle. Mr. Willoughby, I'm Officer Martinez with the Riverside PD. I need to ask you a few questions. Are you hurt? Do you need medical attention? Harold shook his head slowly. I'm all right, officer. Bruised, shaken up, but I'll live. I've survived worse. His eyes drifted toward the cruiser where Jamie sat. I just don't understand why he did it. What did I ever do to him? Martinez sighed. You didn't do anything, sir. Some people just... They don't think. They don't see other people as human. They see them as objects. As content. He spat the last word like it tasted bad. You're a veteran, right? I can see the patches on your jacket. Harold nodded. Korean War, 1st Marine Division. Chosin Reservoir. Martinez's eyes widened slightly. Every Marine knew about Chosin. It was one of the bloodiest battles in Corps history, 17 days of hell in sub-zero temperatures against overwhelming Chinese forces. The fact that Harold Willoughby had survived it meant he was tougher than nails. Sir, it's an honor to meet you, and I'm sorry this happened. We're going to make sure that kid faces consequences. I promise you that. Harold looked up at Martinez, and for the first time since the assault, he smiled. It was a small smile, tired and sad, but genuine. Thank you, officer, and thank those bikers for me. They didn't have to help, but they did. Martinez stood and turned toward Frank, who was leaning against his Harley, arms crossed, watching the scene with the calm intensity of a man who'd seen too much to be surprised by anything. Frank, Mr. Willoughby wants me to thank you and your club. Frank pushed off his bike and walked over to the bench, kneeling down just like Martinez had. Sir, you don't need to thank us. We did what any decent person should do. We saw someone in trouble, and we helped. That's it. Harold reached out a trembling hand, and Frank took it, his massive palm engulfing the old man's frail fingers. You boys gave me back my dignity, Harold said, his voice thick with emotion. I thought the world had forgotten about men like me. But you proved me wrong. Frank's throat tightened. He'd been in firefights, had watched friends die, had stared down the barrel of insurgent AK-47 seconds, but this old man's gratitude hit him harder than any of that. The world hasn't forgotten, sir. We haven't forgotten, and we're not going to let anyone disrespect you. Not on our watch. He stood up and turned to his club. Reapers, listen up. 40 men snapped to attention. Mr. Willoughby is family now. He's under our protection. Anyone got a problem with that? A chorus of, "No, sir," and "Hell no," echoed across the parking lot. Officer Daniels finished taking the last statement and walked back to Martinez. "We've got everything we need, multiple witnesses, video evidence, the suspect's own live stream. The DA's gonna love this case." Martinez nodded. "Let's get him processed." He looked at Frank. "You guys did good today. Textbook citizen's arrest. No excessive force, no vigilante justice, just good people doing the right thing. Riverside's lucky to have the Iron Reapers." Frank shook his hand. "Riverside's lucky to have cops like you, Martinez. Not every department would handle this the right way." Martinez grinned. "Yeah, well, not every biker club would handle it the right way either. You guys could have beaten the crap out of that kid, and honestly, nobody would have blamed you. But you didn't. You held him, you called us, and you let the system work. That takes discipline." The cruisers pulled out of the parking lot, Jamie's pale face visible through the rear window, his eyes wide and terrified as he watched the Reapers standing in formation, a wall of leather and loyalty. The crowd began to disperse, people heading back to their cars, their shopping, their lives, already pulling out their phones to post about what they'd just witnessed. By tonight, this story would be all over social media. By tomorrow, it would be on the news. And by next week, Jamie Caldwell would be a cautionary tale, a meme, a punchline. His 15 minutes of fame had arrived, but not the way he'd wanted. Frank turned back to Mr. Willoughby. "Sir, can we give you a ride home, or to the hospital? Anywhere you need to go?" Harold shook his head. "I'd like to stay here for a bit, if that's all right. I came to visit the memorial. I'd like to finish what I started." Frank nodded. "We'll stay with you. Make sure you're safe." And so they did. 40 bikers, standing guard over one old veteran, while he sat on a bench and remembered his brothers. By the time Jamie Caldwell was processed and booked into the Riverside County Jail, his mugshot was already circulating online. Someone at the police station, probably a clerk, with a bone to pick, had leaked it to Twitter, and within an hour it was everywhere. Jamie's face, pale and tear-streaked, his eyes red and swollen, his hair a mess, stared out from 1,000 screens. The caption that went with it was simple and devastating. "TikToker arrested for assaulting 7 two-year-old Korean War veteran. This is Jamie Caldwell. Remember his name." And the internet did what the internet does best. It destroyed him. The video of the assault, ripped from Jamie's own live stream before it was taken down, went viral in the truest sense of the word. 10 million views in 6 hours, 20 million by midnight. News outlets picked it up. CNN, Fox News, MSNBC, local stations across the country. "Influencer attacks veteran for clout," read the headlines. "Bikers stop TikToker's assault in Riverside, Missouri." The fall of Jamie Caldwell, when internet fame goes too far. Talking heads debated whether this was a symptom of a larger cultural sickness, whether social media platforms bore responsibility, whether Generation Z had lost its moral compass. But the consensus was universal. Jamie Caldwell was scum, and he deserved everything coming to him. His TikTok account, which had boasted 2 million followers that morning, hemorrhaged users like a severed artery. By the end of the first day, he'd lost 500,000. By the end of the week, he was down to 800,000, and most of those were people who'd followed him just to leave hateful comments on his old videos. His Instagram, his YouTube, his Twitter, all of them became graveyards, filled with messages calling him trash, a coward, a disgrace. Brands that had sponsored him scrambled to distance themselves. An energy drink company released a statement. "We are horrified by Jamie Caldwell's actions and have immediately terminated our partnership. We do not condone violence or disrespect toward veterans or any individuals." A clothing company followed suit, then a mobile game, then a meal kit service. Within 48 hours, Jamie had lost every single sponsorship deal, totaling over $100,000 in annual income. His ex-girlfriend, Brittany, posted a video on her own TikTok, racking up 3 million views. She sat in her pristine apartment, her makeup perfect, her voice dripping with performative concern. I just want to say that I'm shocked and disgusted by what Jamie did. I broke up with him months ago because I saw warning signs, his obsession with going viral, his willingness to do anything for views. I tried to help him, but he wouldn't listen. My heart goes out to Mr. Willoughby and his family. Veterans deserve our respect and gratitude, not this kind of treatment. The comments praised her for speaking out, though a few cynics noted that she was using Jamie's downfall to boost her own profile. They weren't wrong. Jamie's parents, a quiet couple from Springfield, Missouri, released a statement through a local news station. His mother's voice was barely audible, choked with tears. "We are heartbroken and ashamed of our son's actions. We raised him to respect his elders, to honor those who served our country. We don't know what happened to him, how he became this person. We apologize to Mr. Willoughby and to the entire veteran community. We hope Jamie learns from this and becomes a better man." His father didn't speak, just stood beside his wife with his head bowed, looking like he'd aged 10 years overnight. The statement was shared widely, and while some people felt sympathy for the parents, most agreed that Jamie was old enough to be held accountable for his own choices. In the Riverside County Jail, Jamie sat in a holding cell, staring at the cinder block wall. His cellmate, a grizzled man in his 50s with a face like a roadmap of bad decisions, eyed him with curiosity. "What you in for, kid?" Jamie didn't answer at first. He couldn't. The words stuck in his throat like broken glass. Finally, he whispered, "Assault." The cellmate grunted. "Who'd you assault?" Jamie's voice was barely audible. "An old man, a veteran." The cellmate's expression changed instantly, his eyes going cold. "You did what?" Jamie flinched. "I didn't mean it was for a video, I was just—" The cellmate stood up, his bulk filling the small cell. "You assaulted a veteran? For a video?" He shook his head in disgust. "Man, you're gonna have a rough time in here. Real rough. Cons don't like people who hurt old folks. And they sure as hell don't like people who disrespect veterans." Jamie's public defender, a tired woman named Lisa Chen, who'd been assigned his case, visited him the next day. She sat across from him in the visitation room, her expression professionally neutral but her eyes betraying her distaste. "Mr. Caldwell, I'm going to be honest with you. This case is a disaster. You assaulted an elderly veteran. You filmed it. You live-streamed it, and you were caught by 40 witnesses, including a motorcycle club with a spotless reputation. The DA has video evidence, eyewitness testimony, and public outrage on their side. You have nothing." Jamie's voice cracked. "What does that mean?" Lisa sighed. "It means you're going to plead guilty. There's no defense here. The best I can do is try to negotiate a lighter sentence in exchange for your cooperation and a public apology." Jamie's hands trembled. "How long?" Lisa consulted her notes. "The DA is pushing for 2 years in county jail, plus fines, plus community service, plus mandatory anger management and social media addiction counseling. If you plead guilty and show genuine remorse, we might get it down to 18 months, with the possibility of parole after 12. But that's the best-case scenario." Jamie's world collapsed. 18 months. 12 months, if he was lucky. His career was over. His reputation was destroyed. His life as he knew it was finished. He'd traded everything, his freedom, his future, his dignity for a video that was supposed to make him famous. And it had, just not the way he'd wanted. Meanwhile, online, the video of Frank's speech was going even more viral than the assault itself. 15 million views, 20 million, 30 million. Frank Garrison became an overnight folk hero. His face appearing on memes, his words quoted in think pieces, his club praised as an example of what real masculinity looked like. The Iron Reaper's social media accounts, which had been modest before, exploded with new followers. Messages poured in from across the country, veterans thanking them, parents praising them, people asking how they could support the club's charity work. A GoFundMe started by a stranger for Mr. Willoughby raised $75,000 in 5 days, with donations coming from all 50 states and a dozen countries. The description read, Let's show Mr. Willoughby that the world hasn't forgotten him. Let's prove that kindness and respect still matter. Jamie Caldwell's fall was complete. He'd wanted to be famous, and he was. He'd wanted to go viral, and he had. But fame, he was learning, was a double-edged sword, and he'd just cut himself to the bone. 2 weeks after the incident, on a crisp Saturday morning that smelled like autumn and possibility, Frank Garrison pulled his truck into the driveway of a small ranch house on Maple Street. The lawn was immaculate. The American flag hung proudly by the front door, and sitting on the porch in a rocking chair was Mr. Harold Willoughby, wearing his old military field jacket freshly cleaned, the spit stain gone, and a nervous smile. Frank stepped out of the truck, his boots crunching on the gravel, and waved. "Morning, Mr. Willoughby. You ready?" Harold stood slowly, gripping his cane, his eyes bright with something that looked like hope. "Ready as I'll ever be, son, though I got to admit, I'm a little nervous. I've never been to a biker clubhouse before." Frank laughed, a deep rumble that put Harold at ease. "Nothing to be nervous about, sir. It's just a bunch of guys who ride motorcycles and eat too much BBQ. You'll fit right in." He helped Harold into the passenger seat of the truck, making sure the old man was comfortable before closing the door. As they drove through Riverside, past the shopping center where everything had happened, past the Route 66 diner, past the high school and the library and the park, where kids were playing soccer, Frank glanced over at Harold. "How you been holding up, sir?" Harold was quiet for a moment, watching the town roll by. "Better than I expected, honestly. The money from that GoFundMe, I still can't believe it. $75,000. I've never had that much money in my life. I paid off my mortgage, set aside some for medical bills, donated $10,000 to the Korean War Veterans Association. I don't know what to do with the rest." Frank smiled. "You earned it, sir. People wanted to show you that you matter, that your service matters, that what happened to you wasn't okay." Harold nodded, his eyes misting over. "I got letters too, hundreds of them, from veterans, from families, from kids in schools who watched the video and wanted to say thank you. One little girl sent me a drawing of me and you boys standing together. I framed it. It's on my mantle now." Frank's throat tightened. "That's good, sir. That's real good." They drove in comfortable silence for a few more minutes until they reached the outskirts of town, where a long gravel road led to a sprawling property surrounded by trees. A hand-painted sign read, "Iron Reapers Me Riverside Chapter Members Only." Frank turned onto the road, and Harold's eyes widened as the clubhouse came into view. It was a large, rustic building that looked like a cross between a barn and a lodge, with motorcycles parked in neat rows out front, Harleys, Indians, a few custom choppers that gleamed in the sunlight. Behind the clubhouse was a massive yard with picnic tables, a fire pit, a stage for live music, and a BBQ setup that could feed an army. And standing in front of the clubhouse, lined up in formation like soldiers at attention, were the Iron Reapers, all 40 of them, wearing their vests, their patches, their colors. Waiting for Harold Willoughby, Frank parked the truck and came around to help Harold out. "Welcome to our home, sir." Harold stared at the bikers, his mouth slightly open, his cane trembling in his hand. "They're all here? For me?" Frank nodded. Every single one. He guided Harold toward the line of bikers, and as they approached, Ken stepped forward, holding a folded piece of leather. It was a vest. Black leather, worn but well-maintained, with patches carefully stitched onto it. Ken's voice was formal, almost ceremonial. "Mr. Harold Willoughby, on behalf of the Iron Reapers Motorcycle Club, Riverside Chapter, we'd like to present you with this honorary vest. You are now under the protection of this club. You are family. You are one of us." He unfolded the vest, and Harold gasped. On the back was the Iron Reapers, patch a Grim Reaper riding a motorcycle, the American flag waving behind him. Above it, in bold letters, read, "Protected by the Reapers." Below it, Korean War veteran chosen reservoir survivor. Harold's hands shook as he reached out to touch the vest, his fingers tracing the stitching. I don't know what to say." Blade stepped forward, his voice gruff but warm. "You don't have to say anything, sir. Just wear it with pride. You've earned it." Doc and Ricky helped Harold into the vest, adjusting it so it fit comfortably over his field jacket. It was a little big, but that didn't matter. What mattered was what it represented. Belonging, brotherhood, family. Harold looked down at himself, at the patches, and the leather and the colors, and for the first time in 3 years since Margaret had died, he felt like he was part of something again. He felt like he mattered. Frank raised his voice, addressing the club. "Brothers, Mr. Willoughby is now an honorary member of the Iron Reapers. He rides with us, he's protected by us, and anyone who disrespects him disrespects all of us. Are we clear?" A thunderous chorus of "Yes, sir" echoed across the property, so loud it startled a flock of birds from the trees. Harold's eyes filled with tears, and he didn't bother wiping them away. These were good tears, healing tears, tears of gratitude and relief and joy. Frank put a hand on his shoulder. "Come on, sir. Let's get you some barbecue. Blade's been smoking ribs since 5 this morning, and if we don't eat them soon, he's gonna get cranky." The afternoon unfolded like a dream. Harold was introduced to every single member of the club, and each one shook his hand with genuine respect. They shared their stories. Ken had served in Vietnam, Doc in the First Gulf War, Ricky in Afghanistan. Others were sons of veterans, brothers of veterans, men who understood the weight of service and sacrifice. They asked Harold about career, about Chosen, and he found himself talking about things he hadn't spoken of in decades. The cold, the fear, the brotherhood that had kept him alive. And they listened, really listened, not out of politeness, but out of respect, out of understanding. The BBQ was incredible: ribs, brisket, pulled pork, coleslaw, cornbread, baked beans, the kind of food that made you forget about cholesterol and just enjoy being alive. Harold ate more than he had in months, laughing as Blade piled his plate high and refused to take no for an answer. "You're too skinny, sir. We gotta fatten you up." After lunch, some of the younger Reapers taught Harold how to play poker, and to everyone's surprise, the old man had a killer poker face. He won 3 hands in a row, raking in a pile of quarters and grinning like a kid. "Beginner's luck," he insisted, but nobody believed him. As the sun began to set, casting golden light across the property, Frank and Harold sat on the porch of the clubhouse, watching the other bikers laugh and drink and tell stories around the fire pit. Harold turned to Frank, his voice quiet. "Why did you do all this for me? You didn't have to. You could have just called the police and walked away." Frank was silent for a long moment, staring out at his brothers. "You know what I learned in Iraq, sir? I learned that the world is full of people who look the other way, people who see something wrong and decide it's not their problem, people who choose comfort over courage. And I decided a long time ago that I wasn't going to be one of those people. None of us are." He gestured toward the Reapers. "We ride together, we stand together, and we protect people who can't protect themselves. That's the code. That's what it means to be a Reaper." Harold's voice was thick with emotion. "I thought the world had forgotten about men like me. I thought honor was dead. I thought nobody cared anymore." Frank turned to look at him, his eyes fierce. "Honor's not dead, sir. It's just harder to find. But it's still here, in places like this, in men like us. And as long as we're still breathing, as long as we're still riding, we're going to make sure people like you are respected, protected, honored." He stood up and offered Harold his hand. "You're not alone anymore, Mr. Willoughby. You've got a family now, and we don't abandon family." Harold took his hand and let Frank pull him to his feet. Together, they walked down to the fire pit, where the Reapers made room for Harold in the circle. Someone handed him a beer, a light beer, because Doc was watching his health, and someone else started telling a story about a disastrous ride through the Ozarks that ended with 3 flat tires and a run-in with an angry farmer. The laughter was loud and genuine, and Harold found himself laughing too, harder than he had in years. He looked around at these men, these rough, tattooed, leather-clad men who society often judged and misunderstood, and realized something profound. They were the best men he'd ever known. 3 months later, Harold Willoughby rode in the back of Frank's truck during the Iron Reapers' annual Veterans Day charity ride. 200 motorcycles rolled through downtown Riverside, flags flying, engines roaring, raising money for the local VA hospital. Harold wore his honorary vest with pride, waving at the crowds that lined the streets, his smile so wide it hurt his face. Kids pointed at him, veterans saluted him, strangers cheered, and for the first time since Margaret died, Harold felt alive. He felt seen. He felt like he mattered. As the sun set over the Missouri hills, the Iron Reapers rode down Highway 60, a river of chrome and leather and brotherhood, with Harold Willoughby riding among them, not behind them, not separate from them, among them, as family. The wind carried the sound of their engines across the countryside, a roar that said, "We are here, we stand together, we protect our own, and we will never let you ride alone." Some families are born, some are forged in fire, and some are found in a parking lot on a Saturday morning when 40 men decided that honor still matters, that respect still matters, and that one old veteran's dignity was worth fighting for. Jamie Caldwell had tried to take that dignity away, but the Iron Reapers had given it back. And in doing so, they'd given Harold Willoughby something even more valuable. They'd given him hope. They'd given him purpose. They'd given him a reason to keep going. And that, more than any viral video or internet fame or fleeting moment of attention, was what really mattered. That was the story worth telling. That was the brotherhood worth celebrating. That was the America worth believing in. Not the America of algorithms and clout and cruelty, but the America of honor and loyalty and men who still knew how to stand up for what was right. The America that Harold Willoughby had fought for in the frozen hills of Korea. The America that the Iron Reapers rode for every single day. The America that, despite everything, was still worth fighting for. And as the last light faded from the sky and the stars began to appear, Harold Willoughby closed his eyes and whispered a prayer of gratitude for his brothers who'd fallen, for his wife who'd loved him, and for the family he'd found when he thought he had nothing left. The Iron Reapers, his brothers, his protectors, his home. Not one more veteran rides alone.